As a member of this community for over 30 years, I remain concerned about what is taking place before our eyes. It is like the giant is sneaking in the night and we will wake up surprised. We cannot let this happen. With the help of Joan Peck and others, Longmont was on the front to ban fracking in Boulder County for over 5 years. We must continue this fight at all costs. The health of this community is at stake, as well as the health of unborn generations. If we let this happen, we will go down as putting oil and gas above health and profit and above the pristine beauty of this county. This community is worried about how much water we will have. Do you know that to fracture a single well site, natural gas companies typically use over 4 million gallons of water? This is the amount of water equivalent to what 11,000 American families use in a day. Our water is precious and need not be used to further the cost of pollution. You, as city council members, must join with the rest of Boulder County in protesting the progress of fracking and ban it altogether. Our community depends on you. Your constituents are watching. And we pay taxes to get open space, and I do not want fracking wells on my precious open space. Thank you.
Peter Champ. Be followed by Oliver Skagen. Oliver Skagen.
Good evening. My name is Peter Champ, 828 Tenacity Drive, Longmont, Colorado. The state of Colorado is unusual in that it recognizes separate ownership between the surface and the minerals that lie beneath. The mineral rights laws that we must contend with today were written in the 19th century, when Colorado had a population less than 1/10 of what it is now, and the average extraction project was a small pit mine. Right now, the city of Longmont is reviewing applications by oil and gas development company Top Operating to frack around and underneath our Union Reservoir, with many more permit applications coming soon for thousands of wells in Boulder County, many on our open spaces. In 2012, the citizens of Longmont overwhelmingly approved a ballot measure to prohibit the highly industrialized fracking process within the city limits of Longmont. Takings is the term used by the proponents of urban oil and gas development, and the implication is that mineral rights holders suffer a hardship by not being allowed to frack. But in fact, the real taking, the taking that affects people's lives and health, property values, and quality of life, is when heavy and chemically toxic industrial activity is carried out in the neighborhoods near schools and playgrounds, on pristine open space, and in this case, around the recreational area and source of water, Union Reservoir. I urge you to protect Longmont and to unify with other cities along the Front Range by signing the letter before you this evening to send to Governor Hickenlooper. Thank you very much.
Oliver Skagen.
Is a warehouse with walls built in it and a parking lot for a playground, like some people already mentioned. Some of the kids that go to school haven't experienced a real school building. So a lot of people are looking forward to this new building, but a lot of these people don't want to go to school by all these fracking wells. Think of all the animals that their homes might be destroyed by these fracking wells. So I don't want this fracking permit to be passed. Thank you.
Selwyn Goldstein.
Selwyn Goldstein, 649 Wade Road, Longmont. I was here last week and I asked council if they knew about the activity of the Burlington Northern Santa Fe River. By the way, I'm not here to talk about fracking. I'm here to talk about another environmental impact in Boulder County. Martin Marietta is planning on doing a gravel mine just outside of Lyons. A letter was sent to you by Richard Cargill regarding that. Anyways, Boulder County is looking at reviewing the permit for Martin Marietta's mine, and the result of this mine outside of Lyons is anticipated to be 200 to 250 truckloads on Highway 66 leaving the mine, going in all different directions, and at least 3 railroad trains going down the Lyons Spur through Longmont. I encourage council to join Boulder and the rest of Boulder County to examine this permit that was issued to Martin Marietta. Once again, I said a letter was sent to you and you could contact Boulder County regarding that and follow up on it. I think it'll have easily as much environmental impact on our city as all the fracking. Thank you. Here's a copy of the letter. Thank you.
Karen Dyke. She'll be followed by Judith Blackburn.
Karen Dyke, 708 Hayden Court. Mr. Mayor and council members, I want to thank you for considering the regional letter to the governor tonight. This is a good start to developing a regional response to an out-of-control oil and gas industry. The letter shows that the region is not standing by idly, but it doesn't seem to have the teeth as to an action that will occur when the governor decides to ignore the letter. Signing the letter cannot be seen as an excuse to say we tried and nothing else can be done. Much more can be done. You can vote to not allow any drilling until a response is received. You can work with other cities who signed to say we have regional air issues and we therefore are going to declare a regional moratorium. During that moratorium, you could write regs that address the issue of the air pollution being experienced by this region. You could give direction to city staff and the city attorney to work closely with Boulder County and others to develop additional methods to rapidly respond when opportunities present themselves for further collaboration. You can vote to not allow any drilling until the Martinez suit is settled. You or your representatives can appear at every COGCC and AQCC meeting and any other hearings to demand that this onslaught against the citizens stops. You can also put out word for Longmont residents and we'll join you. In the event that you determine that proceeding with drilling in spite of the evidence of risk to air, land, water, health, and safety, please consider the following. The public swimming beach must be closed. It is a safety risk for people to be this close to a heavy industrial site. Risk of well blowout, contaminated water, or toxic release of pollutants such as hydrogen sulfide are too high to allow children net nearby. Ensure that there are adequate plans for Trail Ridge Middle School, including how an emergency evacuation would be carried out. Make sure there's a plan for disposal of radioactive material. develop and implement a real-time continuous air monitoring program, produce weekly and bi-weekly reports that are published by the Times Call and the Longmont Observer that include air quality, spills, and other pertinent findings. Both Weld County and Garfield County publish spill reports. This would be an enhancement of those reports. I just hope that we don't have to view reports of spills near our reservoir and our residents. Thank you.
Judith Blackburn.
Judith Blackburn, 3724 Oakwood Drive. Good evening, Mayor Coombs and council members. Wow, a lot of passion in the room tonight. I'm also one of those people who don't want fracking here in Longmont or anywhere. And like many of you and many here tonight, I do wish we could go directly to the next stage of renewable energy and abandon this last gasp of the fossil fuel industry. As appreciative as I am of all the hard work you and the city staff has been doing here lately, I also want to say that I tried very hard tonight to come up with something creative and imaginative that would include both you all and all of us in ways that we haven't quite been able to imagine before. And I must say, my imagination ran a little short, but I'm going to give you 3 scenarios that I did think of, fanciful as they may be. Scenario 1, a rare Colorado hurricane devastates our community, blowing away the drills and the storage tanks, so that Elon Musk has to come in and completely redo our infrastructure with renewables as he's proposing to do in Puerto Rico. How about that for a Deus Ex Machina? Scenario 2. All of us gathering out at Union Reservoir for a big festival on the day the bulldozers show up to prepare the well pads, and we invite the workers to our party as we block their access to the sites. Or scenario 3, City Council stands up unanimously, united with all the other Front Range cities and Boulder County, and saying no to the governor and the COGCC amid wild cheers from your constituents and puzzled looks on the faces of the justices of the Colorado Supreme Court. Scenario 3, we as a city council stand up unanimously and unite with Broomfield, excuse me, to sign that letter as a first tiny baby step toward collaborating as a whole region to oppose with united action this onslaught. Thank you.
Dwayne Lees.
Dwayne Lees, 2686 Earl Howlett. Much eloquence, passion, intellect, truth has been spoken here tonight. Which side are you going to be on? We already see the advancements of climate change. This year, easily $500 billion, maybe more, in infrastructure that's been destroyed across the United States. Putting it into money terms. It's about the only thing our country understands is money. Now for myself, I think that probably what's going on as far as the council's reticence to actually take a drop dead stand on banning fracking and really standing up to those people who are taking from us that which is ours. I think the problem is that what is the cost? What is the cost? How will we pay for another lawsuit? And don't think in those kind of terms. Don't even think in terms of lawsuits. Think in terms of Judith Blackburn, who just spoke before me. What are some creative ways to go outside the realms of what's going on? Look at our country right now. We have nonsense going on. Nonsense, day in and day out. And you're going to stand on the side and say, oh, well, we can't stop something that's going to hurt the health and welfare of our country or of our city. Oh, we can't be that bold. Yeah, you can be that bold. So what's the cost? Let's say you did have to go through another lawsuit. And if you went through another lawsuit, I, for one, the cost of that might be $1 million. As for myself, I will now tonight pledge $1,000 in a fund to pay for that lawsuit. And believe me, the increase in property value, and not just property value, the standing of Longmont in the state of Colorado and in the country will be increased to such a point that we will all reap a benefit from that investment. Stand on the right side of history, do the right thing, and in the end, it will also be economically superior.
Michael Belmont?
Yes, Michael Belmont, 841 Tenacity Drive, Council. I really did not collaborate with Dwayne, but we have been assured that fracking proposed at Union Reservoir will not pose a threat to that precious body of water. The reason given? Thousands of feet of shale between the surface and the fracking explosions that release the methane below. What was not discussed is that to get to that depth, they must drill through surface geology that contains groundwater. So how vulnerable is that? Consider that the extreme constant pressure exerted on well casings is unprecedented through most of drilling history. Only in recent years have we had the technology for unconventional horizontal slickwater drilling. It is true that the industry has improved casing design that stands between groundwater and highly toxic materials like fracking fluids, methane, crude oil, deep earth materials, sometimes radioactive, that are forced to the surface by this process. Such high pressures on casings in the earth that cannot be adequately inspected guarantee an element of risk that no technology can eliminate. In 2012, an analysis was of data done from thousands of wellbores on the Marcellus Shale, recorded by the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. The study determined that casing failure rates over a 3-year period were between 6 and 7%, matching the long-term statistics in the industry. Now, Cub Creek's initial proposal for 46 wells. At that number, a 6% failure rate means at least 2 wells could be, in the first 3 years, fail. It would take only 1 failure to contaminate Union Reservoir. Do you feel comfortable with thousands of feet of shale? I don't. So what to do? May I recommend that you as council figure out a way to at least stall the activity. How about resolving that we will not allow drilling until the outcome of the Martinez case, which impels the COGCC to honor their duty to protect citizens' health and environment first. But what might be the cost of a resulting lawsuit? Well, we have a precedent. Our fracking ban in 2012 cost the city $192,000. For 3.5 years during that litigation, our city was free of fracking and thus enjoyed the certainty that air and groundwater contamination were not even a possibility. That equated to 59 cents per resident per year. So we can estimate the cost of not allowing fracking, 59 cents per resident per year. But I shudder to think of the cost of the health impacts of air quality degradation and potential water contamination from allowing fracking at Union Reservoir. Thank you.
Strider Benston?
I did not conspire with Michael or Dwayne. Strider Benston, 951 17th Avenue. I basically agree with every single word that I've heard tonight. And y'all come tomorrow night to the library, 6:30, a city council forum and debate on some of these very issues. I just learned that China is the world's leading producer, not only of solar panels, but of solar cars now. While the United States is being driven back to coal-fired cars. Serious stuff. Senator Corker, Republican chairman of Foreign Relations Committee, said that the White House is an adult daycare center with nobody supervising. That's what we're dealing with right now. He also said that our president is bringing us to the verge of World War III. We're the closest to a nuclear war right this minute than we have been since 1962. Back then, the two people in charge, Khrushchev and Kennedy, were both sane. Now we have two men in charge who are patently insane. Are we going to have a planet to survive with? Our current president wants to start a war against somebody. It might be Korea, might be Iran, might be Puerto Rico, which he just discovered is an island surrounded by water, big water. He just left that, so he had to tell us. I'm serious. Last Friday would have been the 100th birthday of Fannie Lou Hamer, one of the greatest people in American history. When I met her on the boardwalk in Broadway in Atlantic City in 1964, it's the first time I ever learned what history is. She told her story and I learned history. And she picked 400 pounds of cotton a day for $2.50 a day. And she went to register to vote and they threw her out of her home and beat her head in. And she said, there's bloodhounds at my door, the police beating my head in, they stole my home. But if I fall, I'll fall 5 feet 4 inches forward in the fight for freedom. I'm not backing off. Remember Leonard Cohen, who said, from the war against injustice and the poisoning of hate, democracy is coming to the USA.
Thank you. Scott Cook?
Good evening, Mayor Coombs and members of the City Council. Scott Cook, I'm with the Longmont Chamber of Commerce at 528 Main Street. Later in this evening, on the agenda is a discussion on homelessness. And yesterday we heard a presentation from city staff, Sean Lewis, Karen Rooney, and Kathy Fedler on this issue. And one of the things that was mentioned is that this is not just a city issue, but a community-wide issue. And that's why I'm here this evening. The Chamber of Commerce looks forward to working with the city, our members, and the rest of the community to address this issue. It does impact the business community. However, this being Longmont, our business owners do desire to respond in a way that is best for the homeless and for the community. So far, the Chamber has met with our economic partners such as the Downtown Development Authority and the Longmont Economic Development Partnership, as well as, of course, city staff, Sean, and then, of course, our own board member, Sandy Cedar, who is with the city. With our large network of businesses, currently it seems the Chamber is probably best suited to working with the public awareness campaign, providing information resources to businesses and their employees, and getting the word out on volunteer opportunities. As the plans are implemented, I would like you to know that the Chamber is looking for ways in which we can best partner with you and our members and the rest of our economic partners together to work on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Amanda Wallace?
My name is Amanda Wallace, and I live at 1907 Christie Court in Longmont. And I want to acknowledge the passion, like everybody has said, and the high attendance here tonight, yet it really hardly represents the concern, the level of concern that exists in Longmont about fracking. I've been a resident here for over 16 years and a Boulder County resident for 25 years. I'm a mother of 2 and a psychotherapist, and I'm one of those type of people who talks to a lot of people. I interact with people from all areas around here and people with different political ideologies than my own. And I can tell you that if the vote for fracking today was happening in this upcoming election, that 60% of voters that opposed it in 2012 would be much closer, from the people I speak with at least, to the 75–80%. And this is because people now have really seen the impact on our neighboring communities. And they've heard the horror stories from their family and friends who live in Erie, and Broomfield, and Weld County. They know people personally who have developed all these chronic issues that we've been talking about, headaches and nosebleeds and respiratory issues, and people are inundated with the horrible fracking fumes near their homes. But people have busy lives and children and jobs that don't allow them to come to city council meetings. And that is really what oil and gas relies on, that people are unaware, that people are too busy and distracted, overwhelmed, before it is too late. And I've spoken to actually many people who still believe the ban is in place. No logical or intelligent person wants such a highly industrialized process anywhere near their home, school, or park, recreational areas, unless they're making a large profit. And I truly hope that is not the case for any of you, that you are acting on the behalf of the constituents that elected you and are not serving your own financial or political interests. I hear over and over again, we've talked about it tonight, about the beauty of this area and what a desirable place it is to live. And we voted it in 2012 to keep it that way, and it is your duty to keep it that way. I implore you to continue to fight the good fight. And when the vote on the permits for Union Reservoir comes up, vote no, because it is one of those places that make this a desirable place to live. And I know none of you wants blood on your hands. You do not want what happened in Firestone to happen in Longmont. So you need to do everything in your power to not allow it to happen here. The oil and gas companies will rape our land and use and contaminate our precious water, pollute our air, wreck our roads, destabilize the fault lines, devalue our homes, and take their profits elsewhere. So again, ask you to stand with the majority of people in this community and partner with our neighboring Boulder County cities to create a unified force to ban fracking and keep Longmont a safe and beautiful place to live for all.
Mike Foot?
Good evening, and it's a good turnout tonight. About the same number of oil and gas lobbyists we see at the Capitol every time I introduce a fracking bill, I think. I came because I saw on the agenda was this Broomfield letter that you all are going to discuss tonight, and to make a long story short, I wanted to encourage you all to sign that. The last 5 years have been frustrating for me and for many that have spoken tonight and other times. We've seen the state come in and do whatever they can to undermine the people's will in Longmont and other places on behalf of the oil and gas industry, and for that I've been ashamed to represent the state doing that. The letter is not the end-all be-all, but I think what it does represent is communities in the affected areas starting to get together to speak in a unified voice, because what we've seen in the past has been the industry's strategy of divide and conquer, going to one town, going to the next town, filing a lawsuit here, filing a lawsuit there, and rarely do we see cities like Broomfield, Longmont, and other cities around in the affected areas speaking with one voice, trying to affect change and make sure that you all can do whatever you can to listen to your constituents and us too at the state level. One thing I noticed about the letter, and I know it wasn't drafted by you all, but it seems like there's a number of places left out. Loveland's left out, Larimer County is left out, Arapahoe County, which will be fracked soon enough, Denver County as well, particularly around the airport. There's a number of places that aren't listed on this particular letter. Hopefully, when you speak back with the authors, you can bring that up to them and thought about it already. I'm sure they have. It would be nice also to reach out even to our county to the east, even though on this matter they don't seem to think local control really is appropriate. But the bottom line to me, and I think a lot of folks here, is that local communities should be able to say no to this like they do any other activity, and I stand ready to help you do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that ends public inquiry to be heard. We'll move on to the consent.
Mayor Coombs, your consent agenda, first item is 8A, ordinance 2017-62, the bill for an ordinance making additional appropriations for expenses and liabilities of the city of Longmont for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2017. Public hearing and second reading for this ordinance is scheduled for October 24th. Item 8B is our 2018 budget ordinances. The first one is ordinance 2017-63. Bill for an ordinance fixing and levying taxes upon the real and personal property within the city of Longmont for the year 2017 to pay budgeted expenses for the 2018 fiscal year. Public hearing and second reading scheduled for October 24th. Second ordinance, budget ordinance is ordinance 2017-64, a bill for an ordinance fixing and levying taxes upon the real and personal property within the Longmont Downtown Development District for the year 2017 to pay budgeted expenses of the Longmont Downtown Development Authority for the 2018 fiscal year. Again, the public hearing is scheduled for October 24th. The third budget item is ordinance 2017-65, a bill for an ordinance adopting the budget for the city of Longmont for the year 2017. Public hearing is scheduled for October 24th. The fourth budget ordinance is 2017-66, a bill for an ordinance making appropriations for the expenses and liabilities of the city of Longmont for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2018. The public hearing is scheduled for October 24th. The final budget ordinance is ordinance 2017-67, a bill for an ordinance amending chapter 14.08 of the Longmont Municipal Code on sewer user charges, and that public hearing is also scheduled for October 24th. Item 8C is resolution 2017-96, approving the intergovernmental agreement between the city and Boulder County for immediate resolution and short-term navigation services for Longmont adults experiencing homelessness. Item 8D is resolution 2017-97, approving the intergovernmental agreement between the city and the state of Colorado Department of Revenue Division of Motor Vehicles for driver license, record, identification of vehicle enterprise solution, and user agreement. Item 8E is authorize the city staff to submit a regional Tiger grant application to fund quiet zones along the northwest rail corridor. And item 8F is approve and authorize the Longmont City Council to sign a letter as requested by the City and County of Broomfield to Governor Hickenlooper and the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission regarding health and safety aspects of urban oil and gas exploration. And staff does not need to pull any items from consent.
Councilmember Peck?
I would like to pull F.
Okay, I guess I'll make a motion that we move the consent agenda minus F.
Second.
Okay, that's vote. That passes 7-0.
Your next item for second reading and public hearing is ordinance 2017-59. This ordinance designating the Price Apartment House at 1400 East 9th Avenue a local historic landmark. We do not have a formal staff presentation on this, but staff is present to address questions.
Okay, is there any questions from council before I open up the public hearing on this? Okay, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing on ordinance 2017-59. Is there anybody from the audience that would like to speak on this ordinance? I guess seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing on ordinance 2017-59. Councilmember Finley.
Mayor Coombs, I'd like to move passage of ordinance 2017-59.
All right, I'll second that. Let's vote. That passes 7-0.
Mayor Coombs, your next item is ordinance 2017-60, a bill for an ordinance approving the Second Amendment to the lease for Vance Graham Municipal Airport hangar parcel, page 17. Again, there is no formal staff presentation on this, but staff is present to address questions.
If there's no questions from council, I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing on ordinance 2017-60. Is there anyone from the public who'd like to speak on this ordinance? If seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing on ordinance 2017-60. Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I would move passage of ordinance 2017-60.
Second. All right, it's been moved and seconded by Councilmember Moore. Let's vote. That passes 7-0.
Mayor Coombs, your next item is consideration of items related to the lifting of the ban of sale of retail marijuana in Longmont. The first is ordinance 2017-61, a bill for an ordinance amending titles 6, 9, 10, and 15 of the Longmont Municipal Code on marijuana store regulation, followed by a resolution 2017-98, adopting a fee schedule for marijuana stores. And Sean Lewis will start this off.
Mayor Coombs, members of council, this is the night that we've all waited on and worked very hard for leading up to this point. We have spent quite a bit of time and energy on this topic. Aaron and I certainly have a full presentation that we're prepared to present, but I just wanted to see if that was in the best interest of your time and if you wanted to go through with that presentation.
I'm fine with not going through the presentation because of this in my packet and I've read it. If somebody else wants to go through the presentation. Okay.
I would like to point out that you asked for 5 different amendments at the last meeting, and the last time that we discussed this, rather. Those amendments have all been made. Those were requested by folks who came to council that night and had also sent some information in advance. And so those related to the annexation process, clarifying that stores that are in our planning area but potentially could annex, that those can be annexed with a transfer of license by the state. It's a form that they provide so that they won't lose their license should they decide not to annex and stay in the unincorporated Boulder County, but still be in the process of applying for a license here. So we have clarified that. We also clarified the provision that unintentionally prohibited butane lighters and things like that. And so there were a number of minor changes such as that were requested, and we have made those. So the revised ordinance that you have in front of you is the one that you would pass. We also provided the original ordinance in your packet for your reference.
Okay. I guess I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing now on ordinance 2017-61, and the first person that signed up was Lon Stevens.
City Council. My name is Lon Stevens, and I live at 1722 Tuscany Court. I'm here to talk about the possible lifting of the pot shop ban. So why would Longmont want to remove the pot shop ban? It can't be because of convenience. There are already a few shops on the outskirts of Longmont, so it doesn't take that long to get to them. Right now, I have to drive 15 minutes to get to Walmart, and no one's arguing to have Walmart inside the city limits. Adding pot shops in the city limits just makes it more convenient for adolescents. I can't imagine this to boost our city's image. We already have several places that have named us a great place to live, and I'm sure if we add cannabis, it's not going to all of a sudden make us a better place to live. So the only reason I see this is for money. And I don't know if that's what we want to do, is just add money to our coffers for this. I feel there are numerous reasons to not remove this ban on pot shops. First thing, I don't agree with recreational marijuana. Legalizing a drug for recreational use that impairs the user's ability to think, to understand reality, does not sound like a good idea to me. WebMD.com says the following about the effects of marijuana. It affects almost every organ in your body, and your nervous system and immune system too. It causes slowed reaction. If you drive after using marijuana, your risk of being in a car accident more than doubles. Smoking pot can also have less pleasant effects on your mind and body too. You might have a distorted sense of time, paranoia, anxiety, depression. And there's a lot of risks of using marijuana, which I'm sure most people understand. With these effects then, I would think the recreational use of marijuana is a vice. Alexander Pope once said, "Vice is a monster of so frightful mien, as to be hated needs but to be seen. Yet seen too often, familiar with her face, we first endure, then pity, then embrace." Allowing pot stores in our community will allow this vice to be seen more and eventually to be embraced. It will make it more accessible to the youth, which is a danger. And it can greatly increase the risk of mental health, mental illnesses, social, psychological, and intellectual development. So going back to the only reason I can think of why Longmont would allow pot stores inside the city limits is supposedly to add more money to the city's coffers. An article on Center on Addiction said residents of economically disadvantaged neighborhoods who were assured the taxes from the dispensary would be put back into the community aren't seeing the benefits. In one working class Denver neighborhood, there hasn't been any sign of revitalization despite the promises of city politicians. Newsweek stated in 2014 and 2015, nearly $6 million in pot revenues have been distributed to local governments, but the cost of increased law enforcement, drug driving incidents, fatal crashes, loss of productivity, and a huge spike in gang-related crime bring into question the cost benefit of those dollars. So the only reason to add pot shops is the gain money.
Thank you. Brian Gubberson.
I'm back, 310 Judson Street. I'm also just questioning, what the motive is to legalize the sales of marijuana within the city of Longmont. I'm asking you that you don't allow that you ban that. There's a few points that I'd like to make that basically you are in effect allowing the Mexican drug cartels to set up shop in our city here. I used this story in April of 2016 and how the Mexican drug cartels take advantage of our new laws. Just because it's legal doesn't make it moral or right. If prostitution was legalized by Colorado voters, would you allow brothels here in Longmont? Are we that desperate for income to go down this immoral path? What are you going to tell little Peyton's parents, or the next parents who lose a child to drivers that have been high on marijuana? That you wanted to earn more tax money? I'm just questioning what the reasoning is here. The majority of the stores down in Denver have popped up all over. I don't know if you've been to Federal Boulevard in the last few years, but the neighborhoods have changed. They're unsafe. They're not the neighborhoods that I remember growing up here. And it's bringing in very dark people and energy to their communities. What's that going to turn Longmont Main Street into? I ask you to please reject the fee schedule and sales of marijuana within Longmont. And I am proud as a citizen of Longmont to say that we do not sell or allow the sales of marijuana within city limits. And I'm also speaking on behalf of my son and, all those kids that have easy access to, all the different things in our world today that we did not grow up with. Marijuana is so much more accessible now, and it's a dark inhibitor, and it really, like the gentleman said before me, it really changes your perception of reality. Is that what we're encouraging our kids to do, is to numb out? So I really ask you guys to really question what the motive is, what it is here, because I haven't heard it from you. Why are you really considering this? Think about that. Thank you.
Roger Lane.
Good evening, Council and Mayor Coombs. I'm here to request that you consider moving item 9C to after the November 7th election. On November 7th, Longmont voters will make a decision on ballot issue 2I, which asks voters to approve an additional tax on retail sales of marijuana stores within the city limits of Longmont. My question is, why would you vote on item 9C before you knew the outcome of ballot issue 2I? I believe Councilmember Jeff Moore made the statement to this effect previously in your October 3rd meeting. I also remember Mayor Coombs stating concerning the subject of marijuana sales that he would be interested in the opinion of the general public. You have the opportunity to hear the public's opinion in the November election. Why not listen to them before you vote on item 9C? I just think you're getting the cart before the horse. If you move item 9C tonight, and would be serving the public in a much more informed way by waiting until November to make your decision on the sale of marijuana in the city of Longmont. Thank you for your time.
Keith Harmon.
Good evening, Mayor Coombs and council members. My name is Keith Harmon. I'm the Director of Health Divisions with Boulder County Public Health, and I work out of the office at 529 Kaufman Street here in Longmont. So I wanted to talk a little bit about marijuana legalization. I've had the opportunity to work with a number of the different jurisdictions within Boulder County that have chosen to move forward with legalization. I know that legalization decision really kind of rests within the city council members' decision, and also sort of plays into the values within the community and what they desire. And so I'm not here to speak for or against that legalization. What I really want to do is talk a little bit more about the process for the regulations and maybe some insights into future opportunities. So first, I wanted to at least acknowledge some appreciation for the work of staff engaging stakeholders in the process to some degree to garner some input and some insights in terms of how to develop these regulations. I think it's also really important to take that cautious approach. I think the city of Longmont has demonstrated that clearly over the past several years, that cautious approach. And so I think in the development of the current regulations that were put forth, that cautious approach still exists. I'd also acknowledge that many of the areas of those regulations are consistent with other regulations that exist within other jurisdictions here in Boulder County. From the local public health perspective, that's fairly important. We're trying to at least gain that consistency across those jurisdictions as best we can. One thing that I'm hearing, not only as it relates to marijuana regulations, but also relative to the fracking concerns voiced earlier, is focus on youth. I would offer up that is a common ground from my perspective in working with partners, working with those that are actually within the industry as well. Different community members, school districts, et cetera. Everybody is very much in favor of protecting the youth. And so that leads me to maybe one piece that is missing in the current regulations, and that is a focus on advertising. Advertising is extremely important when it comes to then, putting out information around marijuana and our other substances. And so what I would want to talk about is that impact on youth more specifically. There have been a number of studies relative to tobacco and alcohol over the past several decades in terms of the impact of advertising on youth specifically. And even more recently in 2010 and 2011, a study of 8,000 kids in Southern California also demonstrated the same outcomes. Basically, that exposure to advertisement then actually can increase the likelihood of use and or intention to use within that following year after seeing those advertisements. So I'm not sure if it's within the council's interest to actually approve or have further discussion. I would at least like to offer up in the future, considering an amendment that would actually add an advertisement paragraph or chapter that is in line actually with other jurisdictions. I think at this point in time, every jurisdiction in Boulder County does have those restrictions in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Electra Greer.
I'm Electra Greer, and I'm at 205 Fifth Avenue in Longmont. And it has been a very heated and emotional evening, so I'll keep this short. I am very appreciative that those who have spoken before me on this issue have done their research. I'm just here to lend my voice to caution. I do feel that it is in the best interest of our community to wait on this until after we hear from the public with a vote, so I do agree that we should move item 9C. As I tell my children and the students that I work with, no does not mean not ever, it just means not now. And I feel very strongly that this is not the right time for Longmont. I have appreciated what appears to be very thoughtful consideration on the policies and procedures the city would undertake for licensure and applications. But nonetheless, my sticking point is what I heard continually citing best practices. I think it's very important for all of us to acknowledge that we do not know what the best practices are for this. This was 2014, so we have time to look at the research and we have time to look at what happens. We all know that where big money is involved, we're going to find experts on both sides of the field. And it is true that when you look at this, even the most cursory review of the literature and peer review and public health, is you will see it's a very mixed bag. And I think that's something that we all collectively have the experience to know is a mixed bag. And that means that this is something that being prudent and waiting can only be in our favor. Also, I have been incredibly proud to live in Longmont for the initiatives that it's been doing around mental health and affordable housing and public safety. And all the research that we do see, and also out of the Netherlands, is that there is one constant, and that is that those who will be most adversely affected by marijuana are those, as we can guess, that are already the most vulnerable. And that will be our young adults, our teens, and those who have challenges with mental health and addiction. So we know those will be the people that will be most adversely affected. And the city right now is doing so many things to try to help that community. So I'm not quite sure I understand why we would take steps back on this. Finally, I did just want to share what the catalyst was for me coming today. I was at my son's back to school night, and I was meeting and speaking with his teacher who has children that go to school in Boulder. And I was drinking my very large, overly sugared drink, and he said to me, "Oh, you should see the entrepreneurship that's occurring in the Boulder middle schools. The kids are selling sugar drinks out of their lockers to avoid the sugar tax." And I thought that was my divine sign. I needed to come and share that story with you. So please, again, I advise prudency on this and maybe wait. Thank you.
Georgetta Johnston.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I haven't seen you in a long time. But I also, the very first ones talked about marijuana and what it does. Leads to drugs, leads to alcohol, and I have had some relatives that die, so, I'm really upset about it myself. I feel like that why would we legalize it? And, sometimes you yourself do not really deal with it till it comes to your family, and that's sad. So I hope that you really think about it, and Lord help you and pray about it, because it's just not good. I'm not happy about it. This is a wonderful city, and I think it's just bringing lots of dangers myself.
Barry Hicken.
He had to go home to bed.
Okay. Mike Stevens.
Same thing.
Leslie McCormick.
Thank you for hearing me tonight. I'm Leslie McCormick, and I live at 832 Vivian Street. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak about the consideration of lifting the prohibitions on marijuana retail, both recreational and medical marijuana within the city limits. Not only do I live in Longmont, but I've lived in Boulder County for many years. I'm a psychotherapist here, and I do see many clients. A large number of my clients are adolescents And I oftentimes see clients who are self-medicating. So that might be ADHD, that might be depression or social anxiety through the use of marijuana and other drugs. But the other reason I'm here tonight is I work for a nonprofit organization that serves low-income families, almost 600 in the county of Boulder. And my job is really all about wellness and prevention. I spend all of my working hours at this time working on that side of things. So a lot has been said tonight about access and what a major issue that is. And I just really want to second that. In addition to the large studies that have been done, our organization actually did surveys within our own organization with our youth, as well as doing focus groups. And the youth told us themselves, this was just in spring of this year, that the easier it is to gain access, the more likely they are to use. So I think that bringing the marijuana within city limits does not serve the youth. I don't think that it's necessary in our city for economic vitality. I think those businesses will be okay outside of the city limits, and I think it only serves to endanger adolescents whose minds are not fully developed until they're age 24. So the prefrontal cortex, which is the area of the brain which is responsible for, I see head nods, for planning and organizing and critical thinking, is not developed till age 24, whereas the limbic system, which is involved with motivation and memory, is very, very vulnerable during adolescent years. And a lot of our youth believe that marijuana is not a danger because it's a natural thing, it's a weed. But in fact, the THC levels in the marijuana that is sold now are much, much higher than in the natural plant. Kids don't necessarily know this, and so they don't know the effect on their brain. We're doing our best to educate them, but when we normalize that marijuana is a safe thing by bringing it into our neighborhoods, that's a really hard thing to combat. That's a really hard thing to let adolescents know that actually it's dangerous. So I really want to urge you to help keep marijuana sales out of the city. Thank you.
Okay, is there anybody else that want to speak in the second here? On down.
Good evening, Council, Mayor Strider Benston, 951 17th. I think the discussion tonight, there were people here years ago who talked about the whole comprehensive area. People, cancer victims, people with back injuries, people, all kinds of factors. And there was a full discussion, went on for what, a year and a half or something like that. So I don't want to go into those aspects. I'm not, well, let me, couple of things. Prohibition back in the 20s created the mob. All right, and then you had all of the FBI and the mobsters in Chicago and all of that stuff went on. All right, what happened in the 70s? Attacking marijuana, here's what it did. It multiplied, destroyed millions of lives, created our prison industrial complex, which had millions of victims in there, some for just smoking a joint and get 30 years. I mean, whatever. And the so many factors involved. I worked at the post office in Chicago, severely heavy labor. I handled 120,000 pounds a day by hand. People were broken down, got crushed in the machinery and stuff. But those who went out at lunchtime and came back with alcohol and cocaine would do the most damage to themselves or others. Marijuana folks were generally more mellow. But with the legalization, we had the Sueños and the Nortres here, and there was a tremendous amount of gang activity right here in Longmont. Since legalization, the gang activity is almost totally gone, and the basic crime has gone down, what, 50%, something like that. Pay attention to what's really going on. The banning of marijuana was basically used to create the drug war so that you could throw millions of minority people in jail and destroy their lives. And that is a factor that's still continuing today. We're dealing with the question of city or not city, but the people have already spoken on the basic issues, and if it comes up again, there needs to be a full discussion, not just going after one aspect of it. Thank you.
All right, is there anybody else like to speak?
Hi, I'll be very brief about this. My name is Brian Johnson. I live at 926 Coffin Street here in the great city of Longmont. And to address one concern that people raised, I don't see a reason to do this other than for money. I'd like to recall, I'd like everyone to look back a few months when we were debating the same substance on a different issue, and along came a veteran with PTSD, the lady with lupus, the woman whose son had had pediatric cancer his whole life till he started CBD treatment and has been repressed. There's a lot of people that for this is a health issue. It's not about money. There are legitimate people that have been given the right by Colorado voters, including a majority of voters in Longmont, to have access to this for their health. And I just want to remind everyone of that. Voters of Longmont spoke on this issue years ago. Lastly, I want to remind everyone that we are talking about a substance that is less harmful for you than alcohol or McDonald's fast food. The long-term health benefits are not as bad as McDonald's. So let's just put this in perspective. There's no need to make Ashley, who's wheelchair bound, who speaks here often, transportation for her is difficult. There's lots of people in the same scenario. They don't have the capability to get north of town. It's a matter of access to health care for a lot of legitimate people. I just thought that those were a couple of important facts to add at the conclusion of the debate. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, is there anybody else that'd like to come and speak? Come on down, just line up. One right after another, that's.
Hi, my name is Rita Tsaluk. I live outside the city of Longmont. I don't know if I'm allowed to speak.
Yeah.
39 Coral Place, Greenwood Village, Colorado. I came here because I'm interested to open a marijuana dispensary in Longmont, and I wanted to hear what you guys thinking of it and how the city will see it. And just my very quick minute input on it. I'm from Ukraine, and drugs were and marijuana was so illegal that America not even come close. When I found out the first time my daughter smoked marijuana, I almost had a heart attack. Since then, some time passed. I opened my marijuana dispensary in Denver, Colorado. I would never thought I would, but just want to let you know that my thought of it from the time I was 100% against to the time I'm for. It's definitely does something to us. It's definitely a strong substance, but not as strong as some substances that doctors prescribing to people. I have two drug addicts at home, my mom and my dad, the 81-year-old. My mom is 7-time cancer survivor. She had 7 different cancers. Doctor prescribing oxycodone, that's heroin. My son had ADD, doctors prescribing Adderall, that's meth. Marijuana is better than those. My dad took marijuana because he had knee replacement surgeries. He took it for a few nights, didn't have to take oxycodone. It wasn't addictive for him, and he pretty much didn't even notice that he didn't have to take oxycodone. My mom just takes just a little bit of it, and she doesn't have to take oxycodone. Something to think about. I think it's not what this, as the substance itself is not bad, it's what people do with it. There's a very difference between two people, dispensary in Denver, and it's what people do with it. So, thank you so much. Appreciate everybody.
Thank you. All right, next.
Hello, my name is Patricio Llanes. I live at 730 Grandview Meadows Drive here in Longmont. I've worked with at-risk youth in this community for the last 7 years, and I wanted to come forward to the council and please ask you and urge you to vote no on allowing marijuana dispensaries in our community. Or for recreational use. I have seen time and again with my work at Detention Homes, Youth Homeless and Runaway Shelter, homeless youth coming to Boulder because they hear about the amazing dispensaries they have here, the amazing opportunities for marijuana, not really knowing that you have to be a very wealthy individual with a lot of set plans in order to really invest in this industry. It's not something that you can go from rags to riches doing. I know that for many of you, homelessness in our community is an issue, and recognizing who we serve is an issue, and trying to prevent homeless people from flocking here is an issue if people will choose to come here, and will choose to set up here, and choose to live here. You know, I still park to just kind of hang out there. That once had a lot of drive in their life, that once were attending school, that once did have a lot of promise, and now I see them, and all they do is smoke weed. That's all they're about, is just getting high. And I still got hard for them. I still love them, and I still chat with them. I still want to push them out of that. But it's something I see time and again with their lives now. And I'm not saying that not having dispensaries is going to stop it, but don't make it easier for these guys to get a hold of it. I mean, thank you for the job security that you give me as somebody that works with at-risk youth. I appreciate that, but honestly, I'll give up that job security if it means that a few more kids can graduate from high school here. It means a few more kids can stay off the streets here. Again, I just want to really encourage each and every one of you to not put the money and profits that we'll gain for this through taxes above our youth. We really support our youth with strong library service, with a strong youth center, with strong recreational services that really keep kids off the street and doing pro-social, proactive things. Let's not take a step back from this, please. All right, thank you.
Okay, is there anybody else who wants to speak at the public hearing? I guess seeing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing.
Hello?
Councilmember Santos.
It is about the money. Plain and simple. We already have members of council trying to divvy up what's going to be coming in should we open up dispensaries, should we pass a sales tax, an additional 3% on top of the 3.275. It's about the money. Half of that money is going to go to affordable housing, good cause. Other half is undetermined. The problem is, you know, and I've seen posts on social media. We could use that money for schools. We could use that money for roads. That's not going to happen. Because this council has already decided 1/2 of that money is going to affordable housing. Again, great cause. But we're already putting in, as a council, $1 million a year. So it is about the money. And it is excessive. You know, it's kind of, with all the comments today and past councils, you haven't educated yourself about the medical, the medical benefits of cannabis. Actually, I have. You haven't researched, you haven't read this peer review on this topic. You haven't read, you know, I must be one of the dumbest people on the planet because everyone comes and tells me I'm stupid. Well, you know what, I'm not. Weighing the benefits, weighing what's coming in, I get it. This, you know, a council voted twice, 7-0, to ban medical dispensaries and ban recreational businesses. Twice, 7-0. Very diverse council like this one. Very diverse. So I have advocated that we want to make this really legal, and I come from this from a legal perspective. State law does not supersede federal law when federal law is already in existence. I've been told I'm dumb about that too. But you want this changed? Change it at the federal level. Then let's have the discussion. Let's not have, you know, 3 or 4 doctors in the state of Colorado giving out scripts that says, yeah, of marijuana, cannabis, to see what can actually be done. The recreational side, I just don't know. But again, it also doesn't, you know, the way the ban is right now, residents can still grow their own personal pot. Can't do anything about that, according to the state constitution. Is it still illegal federally? Yes, it is. I can't in good conscience vote. So there are some of the answers to some of the questions. Can't good in conscience vote for, and I haven't, and I will be consistent. I will not vote for the ordinance or the resolution. No big surprise. Some of the people in the industry. Thank you for, and I will say thank you to working with staff to try to make the best ordinance possible. I really do appreciate that. And 2 weeks ago when they were trying to figure out how to make these changes, you know, I'm glad that people, you know, residents and businesses spoke up to try to make it a better ordinance. Is it perfect? No. Apparently there's some sign issues we have. So there you go. It's about money. Plain and simple. Whatever anybody else says, it's about the cash.
No way you can say that.
Councilmember Bagley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs.
You got another motivation.
First of all, what I'm sitting here thinking tonight is, first of all, thank you, Patricio, for your work at Attention Homes, great organization. I also appreciate all the passion and the stances of everyone who showed up the first 2 hours of today's meeting. The one thought that I was struck by was, you know, I do a lot of talking behind this dais, and it just struck me that a lot of times I talk and I say how I feel and where I stand on an issue, and it doesn't matter how you explain it or how many times you say it, people always assume you stand against them. So I guess I'm still going to try. And so on this marijuana issue, first of all, I want to thank my fellow council members for not making it open market. I think that was a very mature, reasoned, let's just see how it goes. Let's see how it goes approach with the four stores. But I am going to vote against it tonight. I was driving in the car not because I think it's, if you want to use THC or CBD, I think that's your prerogative. I think that I look around Colorado. I think there's plenty of access to get those things. I'm not judging anyone with my vote. I'm not making a statement with my vote. But I always said, and I cut a lot of flack with it, well, I'm going to have to explain my vote to my kids. Well, this was the week. We were driving home in the car, and the little piece of paper that shows the windy gap, the marijuana, the safety tax were in my back seat of my Jeep. I'm driving along, and Augie, Mikey, and Jordan are in the back seat. My wife's in the front. Augie picks up and goes, "What's this?" He's asking about the marijuana tax, and I explained it to him. He goes, "So you're going to let marijuana in?" And I said, "Well, we haven't voted on it yet." And another one said, "Mayor Coombs is going to let it in?" And I said, no, there's a council. It's a lot more complex than that. And I said, and they said, well, are they doing it for the money? And I said, well, we're going to use the money for affordable homes, and we're going to use it to help the people who are in need, and we'll probably wind up using money for drug prevention. And all three of them laughed. They said, "Oh my gosh, that doesn't make sense. What are you guys thinking?" So for the main reason that if you're under the age of 25, your brain's still developing, and I just think it's going to hurt our kids. And so I'm going to vote against it.
Councilmember Moore. Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Yeah, I think it's a mistake to move forward with this tonight without having the residents weigh in on the marijuana tax. I mean, that's essentially a vote of confidence for marijuana in itself. The survey we did last fall only had a 56% approval rate, which is not a very good margin of error if you consider you're trying to pass a ballot initiative. And you know, we have the ability to purchase this product walk across the street and you can buy it. And I just don't think it's really all that necessary to be here in Longmont. So for the reasons that we're not going to let the tax passage move the marijuana issue forward, I'll be voting against it as well. Councilmember Peck.
Thank you. Well, it's not just about the money. It is something about the money, but totally. You know, we're a representative democratic government. We're supposed to represent the people who elect us. And they tell us how they want us to represent them by their vote. It isn't what I personally, it isn't about my opinion at all. It's about what the people have decided with the vote, constitutionally, in a democratic society. And that is what we are supposed to represent. We also went a step further to give a survey to see if Longmont is still where it was when the vote passed. And it's still the same percentage of 55%. So in order to represent the vote of the people, I will vote for this. We did ban it a couple of years, and that was a great thing to do because it was brand new to our state. And a lot of the cities were having problems with it. It was a good thing to wait to see what happened with those problems. Even if we wait on this, the vote on the ballot issue is only for the tax, the excess tax. It's not whether or not marijuana is legalized within the city limits or not. It's only should we put an excess tax on it. So for those reasons, just because you have said with your vote what you want us to do, and that is what we're supposed to do, represent you. The same way with your vote on fracking, that you don't want fracking, and I will honor the vote of the people and fight against that. So does one vote weigh more than another vote? Or is it the vote of people? So that's what I will represent and honor.
Councilmember Christensen.
This most emphatically is not about the money. This is about, I'm the one who, initially this was brought forth by Councilman Finley. It wasn't about the money for her. It was about upholding what most people asked for. She withdrew that, and I brought it back because, as I said, my mind was changed when I watched my neighbor, who was a very conservative woman, lovely, diehard Republican, but she was dying of cancer. So this was not something that, she was not a person that you would normally associate with marijuana. But she was dying of cancer. She was 80 years old. This gave her the ability to live relatively pain-free and eat and not starve to death and live and talk to her grandchildren an extra 6 months. That changed my mind. Then when I started looking into it, of the benefits for people with PTSD, with epilepsy, with all sorts of pain, when you do studies of where this has been legalized, the opioid use drops. We have an opioid crisis because people don't understand pain management, or they're unwilling to bear some pain in return to not being addicted to anything. I'm not promoting marijuana. I'm saying that we have already been through this with prohibition. It didn't work. What we want to do is actually have a few select stores so that we as a town can regulate it and have some kind of control over it. That's reasonable, that's moderate, that's what we want, that's what the people by 56 to 44, I think that those are pretty, I don't think that's a slim margin. That's a very decisive statement that people want this both in the state and in the city. We're just trying to do what the people of Longmont have asked for. We can't put this off and table this because we're the council who's been talking about it for over a year. The staff has spent endless hours preparing this stuff and working on it. Our legal department, Sean Lewis, and we're the ones who have the responsibility for voting for it. there's no reason to vote on a tax for something that we're not going to allow. That makes us look like chumps, you know? Why would we vote on a tax for something that we decided we're not going to allow? So, I'm certainly voting for this, and I really, all of our state regulations say this is to be treated the same way as alcohol. And we are not forbidding alcohol in our city limits or anywhere else. We're not just confining it to 2 liquor stores. I'm not a big fan of any of this stuff, personally, but you know, there is a need for medical marijuana, and people want to have access to recreational marijuana. So I am voting for this.
I guess I'm going to weigh in now. I'm voting for it because it's 56 to 44, and I represent what the majority of people want. I think what Joan and Polly both said, I agree with everything they said, and I personally don't think marijuana is worse or even, not even nearly as bad as alcohol. I mean, alcohol's destroying a lot of people's lives. So I'm going to go ahead and vote for it. And I don't understand, you know, when you go to a marijuana shop, they check your ID not once, but twice. I mean, it's double checked. And there's no way that, you know, a 16-year-old kid can walk into a marijuana shop and buy it. So I don't understand those arguments at all. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and support this. Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I will be supporting this as well. And it's not because children should smoke marijuana. It's because use medical marijuana for a variety of ailments, and it's much better for them than the awful drugs that they would have to take to do the exact same thing. Many examples of that, and I don't want to go into it because I don't want to talk about, you know, people's privacy issues, but there are people who use it, and you wouldn't know they use it, but it manages their pain. And it's important that they have access to it. And 4 stores is very reasonable. We already have it in our city. It's not like if we don't allow these 4 stores, it won't be in our city. We already have 2 stores here. They're just not located in very easy places for folks who have access problems to get there. So I'll be voting for it, and I'm conservative, but reasonable when it comes to access to medicine, quite frankly.
Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. What we're doing, if we were to leave the moratorium, the ban, Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, or Eugene, if we left the ban in place, that does not affect those folks that can access medicine from the 2 stores outside of the city limits or grow cannabis in their homes or have somebody, a caregiver, do that for them. Is that correct?
Mayor Coombs, Councilmember Santos, that is correct.
So apparently the mics are off cue again, saying
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
So I don't buy that argument at all. It's about money. You know, and I get, you know, the representative democracy. I understand that. But I find it interesting that we're willing to say it's okay that the state says this on this topic, but on another topic, the state's completely insane. I find that fascinating. I'm going to be saying that a lot the next 2 weeks. Fascinating. Reminds me of Mr. Spock. Fascinating. If you use logic, it's logical. And you can look bored, that's fine. It's logical to allow the federal government to do its job and to vote for people to do their job. Again, state law does not supersede federal law. It's about the money. Don't let anything fool you. It's about the money.
Okay, does anyone want to move ordinance 2017-61?
Mayor, just want to point out that what you have in front of you is a substitute ordinance. We need a...
That's because we made the changes. Councilmember Santos?
Thank you very good. Sean, I thought when you made your presentation, the ordinance that's in the packet was the one we were going to do. So has it already been, it has already been substituted. Dan, I trust you 100%. I mean, but I feel that the ordinance in front of us is the change that now is there.
Mayor Coombs and Councilor Santos, the staff is prepared based on council's direction to substitute the ordinance. The council hasn't used to amend the main ordinance yet.
Councilmember Christensen?
Then I move to amend the ordinance, the substitution ordinance.
Mayor Coombs with the substitute ordinance.
And I think that's right, I'll, whatever you say.
So moved. Okay, moved and seconded. Let's vote on that. And that passes 4-3. And now we've got the resolution.
Now you need to vote on the ordinance.
Okay. Now we're going to vote on the ordinance. Councilmember Santos.
In light of the upcoming election and the candidate who's running for office, who used to do this a lot, and I wish her well, I move denial of ordinance 2017-61.
Second. Okay.
Can I call a point of order?
No.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. According to Robert's Rules of Order number 46, the debate, or it has to be about the issue, not about the person. So when you brought up in light of this council member who's running for office, that was about the person. It was not about the issue.
Okay. Okay, Councilmember Santos.
I was making a lighthearted joke.
No.
I'm sorry, I'm now speaking. I'm looking for hard drive evidence, you know, about things. And apparently, Councilmember Peck has got it mistaken. I can move denial of an ordinance. I can move denial of an ordinance. So that's what I had done. I was making light of a former council member who may have done the same thing in the past. There you go.
I guess I need to rule on this point of order. Can you maybe remake your... Just a minute. Councilmember Christensen.
Point of clarification, what would this actually do? We just voted on this. So
we voted to amend this
okay.
order. So now if you vote for this, his motion to deny it, then it would go down in flames. If you vote no,
Somebody can come back and make the ordinance.
then we can do a new one. So if you're for the ordinance, you want to be voting no. Yeah. Okay, and that ordinance fails 4-3 with Councilmember Christensen, Mayor Coombs, and Councilmember Finley, and Councilmember Peck dissenting.
Oh, I'm totally misunderstanding. This is so confusing.
Okay. Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I would move the passage of ordinance 2017-61.
Second.
All right, that's been moved second. Let's vote on that. And that passes 4-3 with Councilmember Moore, for the Longmont City Council adopting the fee schedule for the marijuana stores. Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I would move Resolution 2017-98.
All right, I'll second that. Let's vote on that. And that passes 5-2 with Councilmember Moore and Councilmember Santos dissenting. Okay, now we're on to the consent agenda.
Mayor Coombs, the item removed was the letters approval, and Sandy will talk about that later.
Mayor Coombs, members of council, Sandy Cedar, Assistant City Manager. You may remember that Councilmember Moore asked for us to put this on the agenda, and here it is.
Who pulled it? It's okay. Joe has to bring it up.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Beck.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I pulled this not because I wanted to vote against it. I'm going to vote against it, but I mean for it. But I actually would like to make the motion to give it more teeth because I think we need an action item here rather than just a letter. And what I would like to do is to discuss and then make a motion about the idea of creating a task force with each of these cities, with perhaps an elected official, a resident, and a staff member on this task force to actually develop a strategy to lobby for or against whatever this task force comes up with for the development of the oil and gas field between Quail and Oxford that Extraction is proposing. So I'm going to make a motion. I move that we direct staff to see if there's an appetite within the cities in Boulder County to create a task force made up of an elected official, a staff member, and a resident of each city in Boulder County to develop a strategy to lobby, basically, in my opinion, to lobby against extraction developing between Quail and Oxford.
You know, that's not what this resolution...
I know it isn't, but I wanted to take this time when we're discussing this resolution. There really isn't a time on the agenda, especially at the comment period, or to have this discussion, and we're discussing the letter now. And we can vote on that, but I wanted to pull it to have this conversation, to give more teeth to this ordinance. So we don't just
understand what you're doing, but this letter was generated by Broomfield, and we're just in support of that. I mean, we can work with them on another letter.
No, this doesn't have anything. These are two different things. Vote for the letter, and then I'm making the motion in.
Point of order. That is not germane to this topic.
Yeah, no. You can do that at the next council meeting under directing staff under section 4. You can do it there, but you can't do it now at this point.
Can't make a motion at this point.
It's not germane to the letter.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, then
we can only discuss whether we're for the letter or against the letter.
All right, I move, what letter is it?
It's item F.
It's item F on the consent agenda.
Second.
All right. Does anybody else have any further discussion before we vote? Councilmember Christensen?
Yes, I wanted to pull this letter too, just for discussion, and because the few people who are still here who testified earlier about this. And some people said, well, this doesn't have any teeth and blah, blah, you know. This letter is about a starting point of one of the many things that we can do to uphold our charter amendment, again, forbidding fracking within the city limits. I'm very committed to this, and I am going to stay committed. And even though this is just a letter, it's a starting point, and it's a place where we can get perhaps a task force, but it says to the governor and the oil conservation people that we are united. This is 3 counties with a huge population, Broomfield, Boulder, and Adams County, and it is 8 or 9 towns. And let me read you, I'm fast at reading, let me read you the last paragraph or so. Additionally, we question whether the statutes and rules that regulate this activity, many of which were adapted many years prior to the combined application of horizontal drilling and fracking, which was about 2008, are adequate to address the current practices and technologies used today. Stronger statewide protections are needed to assure that new wells and pipelines are not located near where people live, work, and play, and that these facilities meet the strongest public health and environmental standards. At the same time, we as local elected officials also need greater local control over oil and gas so that we can ensure, just as we do with all other land uses in our communities, that the meets public health, safety, and welfare standards and is compatible with surrounding land uses. Consequently, we're calling upon you to work with us to take the necessary actions to achieve these goals and address this increasingly controversial issue, which is dividing our communities and undermining the sense of health and safety our constituents feel in their homes and neighborhoods. The status quo is not acceptable, nor is this issue going away. That's the starting point, and it says to them, we're united, and we're going to stay that way.
Okay, we've got a motion. It's been seconded. Let's vote. And that passes 7-0. Okay.
Mayor Coons, your next item is presentation and discussion of Longmont community response to adult experiences on the coast.
Let's take a break. We've been at this for a long time. Let's take a 5-minute break.
What you were going to say.
That was really good.
Hey, John. You know what, Ryan? She pops on
So Racky, will you tell me where you stand on Racky? Oh, good. Thank you. But you're going to work a little harder.
Cut him off? Got his hose in half?
That's right. That's
No, I'm not familiar. Your guy is only 4 stories tall.
I think that
Okay.
Well, had it not been, frankly, about till 2 because where the hell were people in the last Others have their own political arm. But yeah, why don't we maybe
we don't have enough might have the different I don't necessarily I can sign you, make it worse.
Yeah, I think you can bring that back.
And she's good at Oh, sure. No, city government there's nothing really to do. Some cities are
Joni gets the really.
No, I never talked to you about.
That hasn't been
The president just realized it's gonna read. I have to go back and watch that tomorrow.
Okay, we can take our seats and let's get
Didn't have my username right. So, and it.
Good evening, Mayor Coombs, members of council, Sean Lewis, Assistant City Manager. We want to kick off the last item on your agenda tonight with some introductory comments and kind of an overview of some of the community concerns that we've heard around homelessness. But we really want to emphasize that we want this to be a conversation with the community, the start of a conversation with the community about the fact that, as Scott Cook from the Chamber said, this is a community concern, a community issue that will really require all of us in the community, from organizations to individuals to businesses, all working together to resolve and to address, I should say. So some of the community expressed concerns that we've heard are the ones that you see on the screen. Illegal campsites, the trespass, some loitering complaints. Loitering is not actually against the law, but it is a complaint that we get from citizens and businesses. We also have had some issues with trash and human waste, needles and drug paraphernalia, fights and aggressive behavior, as well as panhandling. So we're going to go through some photos. Some of these you saw during the presentation that some of you were able to attend an on-site kind of tour, some of the campsites throughout the community in which homeless individuals are camping in the community. And so you can see the map on the screen that shows that this is not a downtown problem, it's not a river problem, it's a community concern. And so you can see the distribution of the campsites that have been identified by city staff. So these are just some photos. This is a campsite that's on the St. Vrain that you can see. And there are campsites throughout the community. These are a couple that have been found in downtown. I believe the top left is behind the Dickens. The bottom right is actually St. Stephen's Plaza. You can see some makeshift shelters that have been made there. We also have a number of problems that have come to us, particularly through citizens who live around parks, regarding folks that are camping and setting up camps in and around our parks. Also a number of issues with trespassing. This is an image taken of a downtown building in which someone has literally set a tent in on top of the building as a temporary shelter. But as you can imagine, because of the roofs and things, particularly in downtown, these create issues with equipment being damaged, roofs being damaged, etc. This is just an image illustrating some of the trash and human waste that our police and our cleanup crews find and encounter as they are cleaning up sites. We also have had concerns. We showed you when we were going through the standards of behavior for city facilities, some of the drug paraphernalia that's been found, but we also find extensive drug paraphernalia, needles, and actual drugs last week. About 3 pounds of marijuana was discovered at a campsite that was on the river. And this is an image that illustrates in Longmont. Yes, 3 pounds of marijuana is quite a bit. And then we also have noticed, according to police reports, that there has been an increase in aggressive behavior that's occurred in our community. Of course, not all of that is as a result of homeless individuals, but what police tells us is that we have seen an increase in that activity with that population. So these are just some of the groups that we've identified just here at the beginning of this process that we know need to be part of this discussion. I won't read all of these, but obviously a community-wide effort. As was mentioned, we have made a couple of presentations already to groups. We have the Longmont Economic Development Partnership that we presented to that board. We've also presented to the Longmont Business Advisory Council. We are scheduled to present to the Public Policy Committee of the Chamber. We're in ongoing discussions with the Longmont Housing Opportunities team. So we really are we're going to be in the next weeks and months going forth with a public awareness campaign that Sandy and Carmen will talk about a little bit later. So I do want to introduce folks that are going to be presenting tonight. Karen Roney and Kathy Fedler will be talking about the regional approach that's being taken, really a revamp of how services are offered in Longmont and throughout the main service providers in Boulder County. Kathy will be addressing what we're doing from a housing stance, because of course housing is the key to resolving homelessness, and so what are we doing in that particular arena? Jeff Satter will be talking about some of the compliance and accountability issues. He's of course the Deputy Public Safety Chief, and so he'll be going through that. Bob Allen from Public Works and Natural Resources will talk about how we're changing the way we maintain public spaces, particularly some of the campsite removals that we showed you images of. And then we'll wrap up with Carmen and Sandy on community engagement and what we're doing in that. So we've got a number of presenters for you. We also have representatives per your request from Hope and the Hour Center here that are available to answer questions. They have been an integral part of revamping that regional approach and assisting as we look at how to do service more efficiently and effectively and for the most people here in Longmont. So with that, I'm just going to cover the 6 areas of influence that we think the city has in this before we get into that community approach. Obviously, a regional approach, housing, the Human Service Agency funding, you looked at some of those changes recently, compliance and accountability, public space maintenance, and community engagement. So those are, again, just the 6 areas of influence that we think the city has the biggest role in. So with that, I'll turn this over to Karen Roney.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Karen Roney, Community Services. So one of the things that we just wanted to emphasize is that the services that we're talking about and the interventions that we're talking about here this evening are really targeted toward working with adults who are experiencing homelessness. Homelessness obviously affects a broader range of our population, the family homelessness and youth homelessness, but we do have services that are available in Longmont and throughout Boulder County that are certainly addressing family homelessness and youth homelessness in probably a more effective way than what our history has been in working with adults who are experiencing homelessness. So what we'll be talking about is basically individuals who are experiencing homelessness on a chronic basis that have been homeless for over a year and or several times during the past year. And then kind of everyone else falls into that non-chronically homeless category. And we also know, we'll talk about it in a little bit, is that We will be offering better or more effective services, hopefully, for folks who are experiencing homelessness. But again, that would be something that is voluntary. We cannot make anyone avail themselves of services. So we will still have people who are choosing not to avail themselves of services. So the new regional approach is that we are working together as the Boulder County, City of Boulder, City of Longmont, and our providers who have experienced in working with this population, is that we are approaching our service delivery in a collaborative and coordinated way. We now have, starting actually this week, we have now a coordinated entry or a screening system for individuals who are requesting assistance. So everyone who says I need help with shelter or some other kind of service to help them deal with their homelessness, is that there will be a screening process that is a common screening tool that will be utilized with everyone, that basically will help us determine what is the most appropriate path for that individual to receive services based on their level of need. This graphic really identifies or helps to illustrate what that approach looks like. So you'll see coordinated entry there, and the two paths that we have identified are a path for people who have higher needs and need more resources and support to stabilize before they can exit into housing. And folks who screen with higher needs will be referred to what we're calling housing and services, basically program-based shelter or housing-focused shelter in this graphic. That service will be provided by the Boulder Shelter for the Homeless. In Boulder and North Boulder, they have 160 beds, and the goal the change in the Boulder Shelter service delivery is that individuals who are referred to the Boulder Shelter will now be able to receive services and to be able to stay overnight 365 days a year. Not that they're going to stay there for 365 days, but the service will be available year-round every evening of the year. They are also working with making a change in their management plan that will allow for individuals who are being served at the Boulder Shelter to be able to stay there during the day and not have to exit during the day and go out into the community. That is something that that requires a change to their management plan and kind of their agreement with the North Boulder neighborhoods, and the City of Boulder and Boulder Shelter staff are working on that change right now, and hopefully that will be in place in November, first part of December. So again, what this is about is that helping to stabilize people who are experiencing chronic homelessness in order to help them be prepared for an exit out of the system and into housing. And those housing exits would be program-based, permanent supportive housing that's available, like right now in Longmont would be at the Suites or at the Briarwood. Would also be transitional housing, which we do have available in Longmont at the in-between, as well as they might be eligible for and appropriate for rapid rehousing, and which would mean that they would be eligible for assistance to be housed in the private market. That service will also, there will be additional case management available at the Boulder Shelter. So the goal is not that you just get to stay at the shelter now, that you're just there and you're not doing anything on your plan to get into housing. Those case managers will be working regularly, daily, with the individuals who are at Boulder Shelter to really prepare them for, we want to move you into an exit out of homelessness and really into shelter, and they'll be working with individuals to do that as quickly as possible, realizing that it probably will take a longer period of time given they have been homeless for a more extensive period of time. The other path is for what we're calling navigation services. Those would be for individuals who are screening lower in terms of their level of needs. They have had some success in being housed in the past, and we believe that individuals who would be screened appropriate for navigation services have a better chance at being rehoused more rapidly, and not to be in the shelter system, so to speak. As John indicated, our center and HOPE are collaborating on providing those navigation services to the Longmont community. Those will begin on November 5th. We are working right now and negotiating the contract with the Our Center and with HOPE. And basically, what will happen in navigation services is that we hope to get people rehoused within either a day, if that would be kind of the best case scenario, or in a relatively short order. That could be a few days, it could be a couple of weeks, while we work with them on, again, getting into housing. So the daytime services will be offered at the Our Center. Evening and nighttime services will be offered with HOPE through their faith community partners. And again, the goal is that we really provide that level of support, some very short-term overnight sleeping space if needed, if their resolution takes more than a few days, and again, to really move folks into housing and not to be in the community and struggling with where they're going to live. And so that is the quick overview, and I'm going to move to the next slide, and then if there are questions, Edwina and Lisa are here to respond. The other couple of pieces regarding this coordinated system is that we are going to have a common database, which means that all individuals, all information about the clients being served through the system and the services that they are receiving will be entered into and tracked in what we call the Boulder County Connect system, which is operated by Boulder County government, so that we really have the opportunity to see what's happening with individuals, the services that they're receiving, the impact that it's having, and it will give us data to help us tweak and continue to refine the system. We know that that will need to happen. We have a best practice system that we have established that has been used in other parts of the country, but then there is reality, how is that working here in Longmont and in Boulder County, and we know that we're going to need to make changes. This data will help us really with that. The other piece of this, the commitment on behalf of the county funders that fund human services is that we are only investing dollars in the homeless service delivery system that are part of this system. So any other entity that says, we really want to provide services to people who are chronically homeless in this way, but they're not part of this coordinated system, will not receive funding from those three governmental entities. It doesn't preclude someone else from providing a service, but it's our whole hope. And what is promising about this approach is that for the first time we have a common philosophy. We have aligned all the service providers around important principles, how we're going to provide the service, and we really are invested in seeing how this new approach or coordinated approach will hopefully make a difference in moving people into housing, out of homelessness, that's best for them as individuals and certainly for all of us as community members.
Councilmember Bagley?
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Just a quick question. You referred to service providers. So when we were on the tour, there are tents, there are sleeping bags. There are a lot of nonprofits, churches, etc., that aren't part of this collaborative effort. So are we doing anything to reach out to them to help them understand what we're trying to do, make sure that efforts aren't toxic and counterproductive?
Mayor Pro Tem Bagley and Council, certainly part of this will be an ongoing outreach and community education opportunity. So certainly for the last several months, we've been talking about this within our community throughout Boulder County and talking about what we're trying to do and encouraging that we all are aligned if indeed we have providers that are wanting to step in and fill a gap that they see that we need, we certainly will continue to reach out to them and encourage them to be a part of the system, or really to talk about what kind of services would be complementary, as opposed to services that might be redundant or might really kind of interfere with what we're trying to accomplish. We'll do our best with that.
I think that's part of that's also part of the community discussion, community engagement piece that Sandy will talk about.
Councilmember Beck?
Thank you, Mayor Combs. Karen, I really like the class. There's been a problem with transportation. That how are people going to get from Longmont to Boulder, especially if these are people that need supportive services? How are they going to navigate that path?
So we are, Council Member Peck and Council, so we are continuing to look at all that. Obviously, we are working with Hope in regard to some initial transports, and we also have other kinds of services in terms of bus tokens, those kind of things. Again, if individuals who are being, basically being served at the Boulder shelter are probably folks that don't have a need, if you will, to come back to Longmont. It's a different way of doing business here. So folks that have ties here in Longmont, maybe they're working here in Longmont, they might score lower on the on the screening tool, and they are probably going to be best served by our Longmont navigation services and not through the Boulder shelter. So we anticipate that the transportation challenge in the old way of doing business is not going to be the concern in this new system.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Christensen?
Is Boulder County Connect actually up and running yet?
Yes.
Okay.
So Boulder County Connect is actually, it's a database that's been up and running for several years for a lot of different programs and services offered by the county. So this is a new application in that system.
Okay.
So I'm not saying that it's not without its glitches, but I do believe from Edwina indicated that as of Monday,
Okay.
that it is up and running. So, yeah.
Okay.
We're all moving fast and sometimes too fast for the system to catch up. But
Is there any other questions regarding the information that Karen's covered thus far? I know you're going to switch up a little bit.
and then I'm just going to talk about the funding piece, if that's all right. Then. And I believe most of the council members have heard this, and this is really a reminder that with the that we are releasing, that actually we are releasing today, that is really also working to help work a little upstream to keep people who are in housing but that are at risk of losing their housing in housing. So with that 50% of the dollars, that is roughly $600,000. That we are dividing that between half of that to support this homeless intervention model, and half to really help people who are at risk of losing their housing to stay in housing so that they aren't needing to be homeless and be served in that way. Then I'm going to invite
Any questions on this piece?
Kathy Fedler up to talk about housing, because this model is about having an exit out of homelessness and into housing.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, Kathy Fedler. So I'm going to breeze through this because you've heard me talk about this many, many times, and you're pretty familiar with this part of it. But the housing part, we provide a continuum, or try to provide a continuum of housing, so we can try and get folks from zero income all the way up to workforce housing, into housing that they can afford. So on that continuum is transitional housing, which is like the units at the in-between. It's time limited, usually 24 months for folks to get in. work on issues, get training, get jobs, and be able to move into either other permanently affordable housing or market rate housing, depending on where they are as they move out of that. And then there's the permanent supportive housing that's in our continuum, and that's in, units like at the Suites and the Briarwood units, which are behind the Housing Authority. And there's about 91 homes that we have so far there. And then affordable and / workforce rental housing, which we do with public nonprofit and private for-profit partners. And Councilmember Santos and more, this slide is slightly different from what you saw just yesterday. There are actually 1,278 homes, affordable homes, rental homes, that are in our portfolio as of the end of December, and that's changed slightly because I did receive updated information from the Boulder County Housing Authority, and the number of units that meet our affordable criteria dropped by 33 units. So they actually, 33 of the units we were counting in as them are actually serving folks above 50% AMI. And we anticipate by the end of this year having 1,470 total homes with the new homes coming on under new construction. And then trying to retain people in their housing. If we can keep people in housing and keep them housed, not on the streets, not moving out, that is obviously the better way to go. So with the mediation services that Carmen's group provides, as well as landlord tenant workshops and training to try and keep renters apprised of what the situation is out there, how to get along with folks, how to work with their landlord, and the same thing with the landlords, how can we best support them in keeping their tenants housed to try and avoid evictions. This, again, is stuff you've all heard about. You know, we have the Affordable Housing Fund. That's primarily where we get our funding sources to support new affordable housing, our incentive programs to try and increase that, and then the Regional Housing Partnership, which we just heard about a couple weeks ago, with the 12% countywide goals, and a percentage of the units that would be developed as part of that Regional Housing Partnership would be permanent supportive housing. So trying to put as many units as we can into the community in mixed income environments. Comparing the gap analysis that we did, or housing needs analysis back right after the flood, which showed by AMI where our gaps were. And at that point in time, we had unit gaps in every AMI category, including market rate rental housing needs. So this is just a reminder of that, and then the production that we've had since that needs assessment happened in 2013, 2015, 2016, and I tried to summarize the units that were either constructed or underway during those years. But basically, 40 of the units that are have been built since that time serve the 30% AMI category, which is really the category of folks that we're talking about when we're talking about homeless. And we had a gap of 2,500 units. We provided about 270 units in the 31 to 50% AMI category. The gap was about 548, so we about halfway met those needs. We've almost exactly met the needs in the 51 to 60% AMI category, and are getting close to the over 61% up to the market rate housing, with 1,942 units that either are completed or planned and under construction. And then finally, just a reminder.
Kathy, there was a question on the number of units related to the suites.
So those were included in that 1248, so they had already been included in the 1278 or the 1311 that you saw yesterday. So, sorry. So then this is just a reminder that so far we're still not aligned with our greatest rental housing needs, so really trying to meet the needs of folks who are making minimum wages and up to about $18 an hour, and those needing the permanent supportive housing. That's where our biggest gap is, and that's what I basically have.
Any questions?
Councilmember Bailey.
Thank you, Mayor. So is is there another section?
There's more sections.
Now, Public Safety Chief, Assistant Chief rather, Jeff Sutter will come up and talk about some compliance issues, and I think with some additional comments from Judge Frick.
Good evening, I'm Jeff Sutter, Deputy Chief of Police Department. So currently, public safety, some of the things that we're doing is we have a part-time street outreach team. I think many of you met them, went on a tour with them the other day. They work pretty hard in our community. We have our EDGE crisis intervention that helps with people who are struggling with mental health, struggling with some addiction, and struggle with suicide and other issues. We've been working very closely with them. They have some case management that helps out, and they're actually working with one of our individuals that was suffering from severe alcoholism. And then we have our Angel Initiative, which is aimed at substance abuse, where we're helping get people that are suffering from addiction get into treatment. This year so far, we've helped 45 individuals get into treatment. Many of those individuals have gone into long-term programs of approximately 18 months, which includes housing, work, and treatment services. And of those 45 that we helped this year, I believe 23 of them were homeless also. So they're getting a lot of benefit. Some of the proposed public safety changes, we're going to dedicate more time with our street outreach team, more officers to work on some of these problem areas in town and make it more of a problem-oriented policing solution. And we'll incorporate, besides our street outreach team, some of our officers in different shifts and really identifying these problems and getting into those areas where we can make it, take some enforcement action if necessary. We're also we're going to increase the priority for our homeless-related calls. Again, that goes back to just, focusing on, and that's a lot of calls for service right now, but kind of focusing on some of the problem areas in our community, some of the greenways, etc. As you know, we have 28 square miles. You saw the map earlier. Those were all documented by our outreach team. And then Judge Frick is going to talk about some of the treatment options if we're sentencing these individuals.
Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council. I'm Judge Robert Frick, your municipal judge. And one of the kind of exciting things about this conversation is to put into practice events that are going on, because there is no one answer, there is no one size fits all for this. And one of the things that I want to kind of encourage the thought process is how do we engage the individuals that come before the door? And that's where I see that in the municipal court, where if someone comes to the court, someone is actually coming in, responding, chances are I can get them engaged, I can get them in referral. Where we're seeing our problems are for those individuals who have checked out and remained checked out. And how do you get them to those services quicker, faster, sooner? And so I can tell you some of the things I've heard tonight and in our conversation is good, because one of the proposals and things that I've already started to implement is like a treatment model of court. And so, Councilmember Bagley may be familiar with some of our, like for example, the drug courts in the different jurisdictions of the DUI courts. But we also have around the state, there's several courts, or court programs, I should say, dedicated to homelessness issues. Notably, you can look at the Jumpstart program in Loveland, you can look at the Veterans Court in Lakewood. Those are very two specific courts that are designed to address homelessness and homelessness issues, because they almost always come, as we've heard over and over, with mental health concerns, substance abuse concerns. And you have to look at it differently. This is not this is kind of an evolving judicial thought as well. For example, if someone comes before the court and they are engaged, what are the three things that maybe I need to have them do? Number one, some kind of stability in housing. Number two, I need to get an ID. Number three, I need to get a referral for Medicare, Medicaid. If the individual is successful in those three things, then they're successful in the program. We're putting stability in that individual's life. But that also goes, the idea of a homeless navigator, I can tell you that my counterparts in the municipal court of Boulder are thrilled with their homeless navigator currently and getting these people engaged. One of the questions that Councilmember Peck had mentioned was transportation. And I know, city manager, I had a conversation, there's an individual who lives relatively close to where my home is, my residence. I've now seen him in Boulder, Longmont, and Arvada. Now, it's not the 100-mile round circuit for this individual. And I've seen him regularly in all 3 jurisdictions. And he's not coming before me as a defendant or something of that nature, but the community does get around pretty well. And so, or at least some of the community gets around well. But that being said, how do we, again, get people to engage? Now, we also have, and as you're aware, of the other end of the spectrum. Deputy Chief Satter was talking about the calls for service. We have individuals, and several of them in front of me right now, that we're talking they have 400, 500 contacts with law enforcement. Not 4 or 5, 400 or 500. And so, I mean, there's obviously a public safety concern that goes with that, and that individual has not, come to the realization of what's acceptable behavior in our community. And so I wish there was a easy test to do this, but that is definitely one of the things I wanted to propose was, the use of more treatment model style courts with these type of practices, especially for our chronically homeless or even our non-chronically homeless. Those are the people that are probably most receptive to the service, but that doesn't mean we don't stop trying at anyone else, but those are clearly the ones we can target right away. The other second was to emergency action, resolve, and adjudicate. Since I took over as your municipal judge now almost 16 months ago, one of the things that I did right away for the officers is like if somebody gets arrested, gets contacted on the street during business hours, and they have a municipal-only warrant, instead of taking them to the jail, bring them to the court and contact, make sure that we're available, or that sort of thing. The idea being that you have immediate reaction to services. And take that to a step further with our homelessness population is an immediate referral for services. And so let's say, John Doe gets contacted, has an active warrant because he's now missed court 2 or 3 times. He's brought before the court right away. But the idea is how do I get that individual immediately into services or immediately referred to services? And that's been a challenge. And I think the Homeless Navigator in part will satisfy some of that. I'm excited about some of the outreach chiefs and the regional approach to this. But I also think, it's kind of another comment, it's more than just Boulder County. We should really be looking to our partners in Broomfield, Adams County, Denver, and Palm County, because it is a much bigger issue. So, those are at least a couple of my thoughts here tonight. I am available to answer any questions.
Councilmember Beck.
Thank you. Thank you for that explanation. It sounds like you've got a really challenging job here. But this one, my question actually is for Chief Satter for the street outreach team, and it has to do with the idea that Chief Butler brought to us through an email, the idea based of a work program based upon what Albuquerque, I almost said Alamosa, about everybody contributes in our community that, and I think the people who are falling below the services that the county is going to offer, the people who are actually the businesses are complaining about a little bit. I think what the Albuquerque model was, if I understood it correctly, was that people would be, who were just hanging around would have the opportunity to do some work in the community, like cleaning up the shoveling snow maybe for the elderly, or doing something so that they are feeling useful, feeling part of the community, and being given a choice, given contact also. Has that been discussed at all, or?
I know it's been discussed, and I think there are a number of opportunities that we could use those kind of services in our community, just patrolling the greenways, helping clean up the greenways, helping clean up the neighborhoods. I think there's a lot of dignity in working for your services. Our Angel Initiative, a lot of the treatment centers, all these people are working for those services. And with that comes dignity, with that comes camaraderie when you're working with others and for the common good. So I think there's a lot of benefit in those kind of programs where they get a hand up instead of a handout. And there's always more dignity, and you know, that's how we were all raised as kids. I know my dad made me go out and get a job when I was a kid. He made me work hard, and I like to think I was better for that. And I think the same thing when people are working and they feel valued and respected.
And get their dignity back.
And they
So
get their dignity back. It's really important. And I think there are opportunities for that.
So we've had the conversation, and specifically I will take you back to this approach that we talked about earlier, is our primary goal is really to try to get in quickly and make lasting changes with folks. And so when you look at, basically you look at the folks that will go in the navigation service section, some of those folks right now may have 2 or 3 jobs. And so we don't want to distract from the work that they're already doing in that section. And then if you look at the other side, there is a lot of need that we need to give folks, we need to work with them to get them to a point where then hopefully we can shift into the navigation services. So we've talked about how do we try to, Karen and I have had this conversation, and Mike's been part of it, is how do you blend it in there? And in some cases, some of the services may be, one of my suggestions was, as you have somebody that moves into the navigation piece and they move out, is in a way, how do they almost take the role of being a mentor to folks that are moving into it and working in that arena? So we're having the conversation. I think this, again, is one of those pieces as we see who's going in and who's moving where, we can get a better understanding of what that would really look like.
But when you go back to the first slide where the bubble was purple, this one, homeless and refusing assistance, those people, are those the people that you were seeing camping on the St. Brain? And are those some of those people? Because that's what I was thinking the Albuquerque model might work.
Ideally, I think so eventually, hopefully we want to get those folks where they're moving into the programs that we've established. I think one of the challenges that you find in that section, and we have other experts behind us, but in a lot of cases, you deal with a situation where if they're refusing services, they want to be left alone, and that's a different issue to deal with. I can give you the example of an individual that we, when I was out with the street outreach team that we encountered, that just did not want to talk to anyone, deal with anything. They eventually got edged to go out. The original call was yelling at folks as they were on the greenway. And that's really where you start getting into that dot, and that's even more complex.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Christensen.
I don't see, I'm sure that somewhere in the services, because I know all people involved here, there are many attempts to get people to get jobs, and 40% of the people who are homeless already have a job that just doesn't pay enough for them to put a roof over their head. But work really, that's the advantage of the Albuquerque model, and if we put a lot of emphasis on that and trying to get people into training programs, because there are all the employers keep saying, well, we can't find qualified people. Okay, so people need to be trained, but then we need to help connect them to different training programs, because people do want jobs. They just often don't have any of the skills that they need to when they get further and further away. So I'd like to see a real emphasis on helping people get connected with workforce, helping them get into jobs and all that sort of stuff. And also I have a comment for Judge Frick. Well, we're so happy to be collaborating together and working together. All of the collaboration pieces haven't been worked out, but yesterday, the Boulder Shelter was at the Hour Center from 10 to 4, and today again 10 to 4, actually doing coordinated entry interviews. And about approximately 20 people were seen. About five agreed to go to the Boulder Shelter they were the high at-risk individuals who will be benefiting from the program there. And one person I think we've all worked with
who was one of the people that left the Dickens, is now at the shelter. He was actually the most appropriate person you could think of that needed to be there. A senior gentleman who had several medical this winter. So I think we're already seeing progress just in the 2 days for people who need to be there. We are concerned, of course, about those individuals that don't want to participate. And I think as we go along, we as a community need to work together to have a common plan with those individuals so that we're all speaking the same language and giving the same message. I do think as time goes on, if we are giving the same message, that some of those folks will come around. That when we're communicating with each other, when we will be acting together on those situations, that some of those folks will be coming into the system. We don't start navigation services till November 5th, but those folks that are being screened by the old shelter staff are being told about navigation services, so I think we'll be seeing those folks as they come around. But so far, 20 people are in the Boulder County Connect system.
Okay. And I'll share that on November 5th, street outreach, as you know, it is going to change. I understand that there's been some distaste for street outreach in the way it's evolved over the years, and coordinated entry is the perfect opportunity to revamp that service because now we'll be able to provide the supplies and the food that we're giving folks on street outreach in navigation. So once they are assessed and directed to navigation, that's where they'll get their evening meal and any supplies that they may need. Instead, we're going to be doing what we're calling a search and save model in the evenings and going out and looking for folks that are vulnerable, connecting them to services, bringing them to navigation if they will agree to come, and hoping not to miss anybody, but to change our outreach. We're actually going to change the name of it so we don't confuse our clients. We'll do street outreach during the day in partnership, possibly with LPD. We work pretty closely with David Kennedy, who is one of the LPD outreach officers. We meet with him regularly, and we are going to add a daytime component with Hope staff. The evening search and save will be our regular volunteers, and they will not have a van full of supplies. There will be no evening meal. There might be some emergency blanket, socks. At least that's what we're thinking of now. And one thing that wasn't mentioned tonight about the whole coordinated entry is that it is, we're considering it a pilot. Everybody who's involved with it. So that means that we understand that there's a lot of adjustment that might need to be made. And Karen did add that it's rolling out pretty darn fast, especially here. Boulder's had a chance to work on this for about a year, but in Longmont, it's only been a couple of months. So I think that a lot of credit goes to this team for working together to see that we can get it going so quickly. I'm really impressed with all of the collaboration countywide, not just with service providers, but with government. Everybody believes in the system, and it has been proven nationally that it can work. So we're excited. We're hoping for some positive outcomes and really bring about some change. And a big one for us is that street outreach. It's been 10 years, and it needs to change. So, any questions about street outreach? That's a big one.
Okay. So I would like to ask Judge Frick something, or just I think that this is a brilliant idea because, as you know, we have to make anyway. We have to, in order to reach the people who really aren't typical, who sort of forget about things, or they don't have a way to get to court, or they don't go to court, this helps them say, we know this is an emergency issue, you don't have any services, and we're going to help you right now. But we're also going to hold you accountable right now. My father, when he was about 25...
we have to either decide whether to extend the meeting or not extend the meeting. We got like 30 seconds.
I vote for extending it slightly.
Okay. So you're making a motion to extend it. Do we have a second? Okay. Let's vote.
Yeah, but.
Dennis.
Dennis.
We should pick up where we left, we pick up where we left off, though, if it's done now. We're not done with the discussion.
Okay. Passes 5-2 with Councilmember Bagley. Councilmember Santos.
Okay, can I finish?
Yeah.
Okay. Just a small anecdote. When my father was about 25, he was riding his motorcycle in his bathing suit through a town that had blue laws and they didn't allow motorcycles or anything. So anyway, the police officer took him directly from his motorcycle to the court where he appeared in his bathing suit, and it really impressed him. He never did show up in court again. It was probably the only thing that would have impressed him. So I think that this will serve well for a lot of people who understand that they need to be accountable and that there is help available. So I really congratulate you for doing this.
Councilmember Bagley?
Thank you, Mayor Jones. We mentioned it, first of all, Edwina, as you know, I'm a big fan. Our Center, awesome. Lisa, I can't see you behind the podium, but hats off to you for taking an objective look and tweaking Hope Services and what I think, at least, the cooperation that you guys are having, you and the Our Center. I think it's a great thing. I guess the one thing, I mean, after 11 o'clock, I have a hard time thinking straight. This is an important issue. But I guess my question is, it's obvious that you guys are focusing on compassion. I think that's the first thing we need to think about. We need to be compassionate as a community. And we also have all verbalized the importance of accountability. But I think that the question I have, and again, not necessarily tonight, because it's late, is what are we doing to make sure that everything that we offer is teaching accountability? And last but not least, one thing that hasn't been mentioned that I think that we need to also ask ourselves, we shouldn't just require compassionate, or we shouldn't just need, we shouldn't, like I said, it's late. We shouldn't be just compassionate and insist on accountability, but I also think there needs to be a third element that we ask ourselves when we provide services, which is, are we keeping our community safe? And so I think, I mean, so as we're talking about these integrated programs, and as we're talking about our compassion and what we need to do, the question I have, again, not tonight, but on a different night, which is that how are we assuring that we're not being a magnet to those who are coming from outside our community? How are we assuring that we're not increasing that list that Deputy Chief mentioned? And rather than just talking about the importance of dignity and accountability and self-reliance, specifically, what are the actual things that these programs are requiring to make sure that happens? Because my fear is that those last two aren't happening.
So we can bring that back. I think the piece, and that question was asked yesterday at the LEDP meeting, is folks have to be making progress and going through these programs. If you're not making progress and going through the programs and not willing to take those steps, then you're not going to be part of the program. And I think that's the piece of it, and we can send it out in council information in terms of
I'd like more details
the steps on that.
Is there more to the presentation?
Yeah.
Let's move on.
Here and go through this. You know, one of the things that he's here to answer more detailed questions, but you know, we're really talking about parks and sanitation, regular maintenance on that piece. The council will recall in the budget, one of our proposals is really to add additional dollars focusing on the downtown area. We'll show you that map in terms of what it looks like. And then really a focus on SEPTED types of design, where we look at how are we designing areas and how are we structuring those so we don't create situations that are easy for folks to create camps and in certain areas and have that negative interaction with the residents of our community. One of the things that we talked about, and you saw the pictures of the slides, is really a public safety, public works collaboration in targeting a 24-hour cleanup in these areas. And we're working on the technology aspects of this with our GIS system that will embed all of this information so that it can move from those folks that identify those locations to our public works department so they can clean up the areas as quickly as possible. You know, and that tends to be the big complaints that we get from neighborhoods in our community. And what we're finding is, in some cases, when they go in and clean up those areas, they, if they stay on top of it, they tend to maintain themselves. This is the area on the campus maintenance map that we were talking about in terms of that additional funding and what we're going to be looking at. So I think the piece that really the takeaway in this case is just a different model of how we approach it and reducing the time in terms of the cleanups in areas that are identified. Sandy.
Carmen. And Sandy.
And Sandy, Mayor and Council meeting. So we're really going to talk about community engagement and how do we get all sectors of our community, and I'm not going to read through this, but real quickly, to not only provide education, but provide opportunities for us to partner and that common agenda that Edwina mentioned and that path so that people can have compassion and direct folks. And then we'll schedule to do discussions with partners. And I'm going to let Sandy talk about the next step.
All right, thanks, Carmen. So really talking about this with partners, you've heard all of this stuff that the city is embarking on. Some of it is very different, some of it is the same kinds of things, but with a new twist to it. But the piece that's missing is that we cannot do it alone. There's no way that we're going to be able to make a dent in what's happening with our homeless population without the entire community coming together and taking part. That may look like different things for different people. You saw some of the partners that we're really engaging with. When I've had this conversation with members from the Longmont Chamber of Commerce, they're saying, yes, help us figure out what we're supposed to do, because we will do it, whatever that is. And so trying to figure out what is the right role for not only some of our business partners, but actually, you've heard what's happening with the nonprofit, but even down to what the individual is doing. So the public awareness campaign that we have started to brainstorm a little bit on is the idea of take one step as a campaign. The idea being that regardless of where you stand on the issue of homelessness, take one step towards a solution. So for example, if you would normally ignore somebody who is homeless, take one more step and say hi. Make sure that they're not invisible in the community. If you would normally say hi to someone who is homeless, take one more step and connect them to a service that's actually going to get them off the street. If you would give them $1, take one step and give that $1 to the nonprofit folks behind me to actually help with what's going to happen. We're going to be encouraging people not to give money directly to folks who are homeless. It doesn't mean that other people are going to stop doing it. It doesn't mean that everyone's going to stop giving people money. It doesn't mean that everyone who is well-meaning isn't going to try to do something to help. But if we can help to educate people one person at a time, one business owner at a time, one community group at a time around what we can do together, I believe that we'll be able to move this needle forward to explain what this piece is. That's going to be training, it's going to be partnership, it's going to be campaign work, it's going to be marketing, it's going to be all sorts of stuff. But the whole point is to bring the community together to solve this, because that's the only way that it's going to happen. I think that's the last slide.
So Mayor, Council, we kind of blew through the last couple of slides on this one. But what I wanted to do is really start trying to pull all this together. One, I think what you've seen is this is a very complex issue that we have many different pieces and many different departments. Our partner organizations working on this on a consolidated strategy. We began focusing on this 2 years ago, and one of the things that we found as we looked at it from an organization is we handle it differently internally. And we said we need to really figure out how we're going to handle this as an organization. And I believe you all have adopted 6 or 7 ordinances that we've worked through, and it really allowed us as an organization to come together and solidify how we're going to handle that internally. you're seeing the same work and the same conversation occur with the city and the partner organizations as we do this. You know, when we talk about the multi-pronged approach, what we're saying, and you heard me say this the other day when we had the tour, is if you look around at cities across the nation, this is not a problem that government can solve on its own. Just can't do it. Cities have tried for any number of years and they haven't been successful. This is something that's going to take the city, our nonprofit organizations that we partner with, but it's also fundamentally going to take our business community and the residents of our community to come together and where we all approach this in a similar fashion to the best of our ability. When Councilmember Peck talked about jobs, what we didn't talk about, and I forgot to mention, is that that is part of our conversation with the Chamber of Commerce and with LADP is as we look at bringing folks through these different processes, are there jobs that we can move them into? We know that we have a 1% unemployment rate right now in I think, in Longmont, not just Boulder County, but in Longmont. And so are there jobs that we can move folks into as we're bringing them through this approach? That's really important. It's important in terms of how do we partner with those businesses in terms of property owners and building in that accountability. We had a conversation yesterday where a business owner was saying, what do I do with my property? You know, I'm having issues, I'm calling the police, but we can't do anything. And I pulled him aside and said, well, what you need to do is you need to post your property appropriately. You're already doing one thing that is good, and they were going out and having that interaction. But without the posting, it's hard for the police officers to do what they need to because of that issue, and they've already engaged in that conversation. It's also fundamental in engaging with our neighborhoods, and that's the piece that Carmen's talking about, because what we find in different areas is that, you know, I asked the question about Part A versus Part B, and they're both close to similar issues, but Part A doesn't seem to show it. And what we're finding is it's the engagement of the neighborhood in the park and the frequency it's being used and folks moving around that area, and that's the conversation with the neighborhoods, because when you look at this situation, and you've heard this from Chief Butler a lot, is if you just look to the folks here that are presenting this, we'll make a change, but it really takes all of us because there are eyes and ears, and we're asking folks, if you see a camp structure, here's how you're going to report it to us so we can get the folks out to look at it and do what they need to. And we can let the outreach teams know, hey, this is what's going on. So what you're seeing is the beginning of a broader community campaign that's going to take everybody in our community to come together on this issue.
Councilmember Johnson?
When we give people those yellow tickets that they shouldn't be camping, nowhere on that, does it say somewhere on that where they can go, who they can get help from? Okay.
It does. They're saying yes behind me, so.
It does? Okay. All right.
Councilmember Bailey?
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. If the city attorney and city manager do not have any items, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
If they don't have any items. So that gives me the opportunity to.
Okay, let's vote. This meeting is over.
I'll see you later. Okay. At the next.